how did you come about knowing how to ask good questions, or what type of questions that you ask? And why do you think that one's really essential for engineers in their career?
I mean, if we talk about questions specifically to the cold contacting, the key to a good question is listening. They might say, did this project, did this, whatever. But in between the lines, like, what does it show? What does it show their passions are in? And yeah, it's just the importance of whoever ends up taking on this advice that we're sharing right now and actually cold contacting. You don't want it to be like, yes, have your preset questions, but let it be an exchange. Let there be follow-up and demonstrate that you're not saying the question just for the sake of saying it. You're actually wanting to gain something from that conversation.
One of the most important parts of your career are those first few years when you're actually starting out. It lays the foundation for your technical and soft skills development. So how do you maximize those early years of your career? In today's episode, we're going to talk to Tsandi Chen, a structural engineer in training at HDR, about how you can stand out, make those career connections, and hit the ground running early on in your career. I'm your host, Matt Picardal, and this is the Structural Engineering Channel.
Before we dive in, we'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the FE and PE exams. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Tsandi, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey so far?
Yeah, so I'm Tsandi. I've been in the industry for 3 years. Before that, I graduated from UCLA in bachelor's in 2020 and master's in 21. I've gone to work on different types of projects, multifamily, mixed use. I'm now working more on federal and hospital projects. Throughout these 3 years, I've also gotten more interested in how I can play a part in reducing the embodied carbon in projects. So I've gotten more involved with this industry organization called Carbon Leadership Forum Los Angeles, which I absolutely love, and the group that we're forming. So yeah, that's my journey so far.
So it seems like you graduated from UCLA and then you went straight into an office environment early on in your professional career. Do you believe that's important for engineers? How do you recommend that experience in terms of going right into the office right after school?
Yeah. Actually, my plan originally was that after bachelor's that I would take a gap year where I would work in the industry, like an internship for a year. That was the original plan. Unfortunately, that internship got rescinded because of COVID and budgeting. So thankfully, our department, this was now spring 2020, thankfully they decided to open up late applications for masters because a lot of people's internships got rescinded and ended up doing master's right after bachelor's and then going into industry. But what I will say is the company I'm with now, HDR, they're a structural team. I love how we work. Our team is around 10 people, and our boss comes in every day. He shows up every day and he encourages us to do so. And it just makes it easier for asking questions. I compare it to the firm I was with before, who I love all the people there. But it was more of a hybrid sense, and a lot of project managers often, maybe they live far away. So any time to communicate with them would be through Teams or virtually. And I see the value of when you're in person, and well, there's two things. One is that you end up learning, adapting to the company culture way more quickly if you come in person. And that is a good thing. You want to do that. You want to grow. You want to learn from your seniors. And that's just an overall beneficial experience. The side of that is working on your communication in general, because communication is not just the words you say. It's the nonverbal part. It's the tone. It's the whole package. And when you are working mostly in a remote environment, you're really just, either typing or you're focusing a lot about the words, but you miss out on the opportunity to practice how you say things and how it gets communicated across. And that's so important when you think about the larger picture, where currently, you're just a younger engineer. You're learning how to communicate with your boss, but you want to practice in being good at that, because when you end up getting the opportunity to be the direct contact to clients, to contractors, to architects, you want to be at the position where it's so easy for you to communicate with them, so easy to build rapport with them. And it all comes from like the baby steps from the very beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, in terms of our industry, the AEC industry, I do view it more of as an apprenticeship, right? I think you can do, especially if you're young, you can do work from home, but it has to be a lot more intentional, right? I think there's less ways that you can, just hearing people over the phone, how they talk to clients, how managers talk to clients, that kind of just shows you, oh, okay, subconsciously you just hear stuff like that. So I think there's a lot more that you can get from going into an office, but I don't think it's impossible. It just has to be really intentional. In terms of that communication, from my experience, it was really cool I have my manager when I was younger to just be right there, and I could ask him maybe sometimes dumb questions, but it was nice to just have that feedback, right? And so you're not spinning your wheels. And I think that helped accelerate my learning experience, just because it's like the full immersion, right? You get their questions, you get to see how they talk to clients, how they treat people, and how they respond to things, not just verbally or email wise, but communication wise, like you were saying, in terms of it's not just verbal, it's the whole thing. And even going out to site visits with them. Yeah, I think there's definitely some advantages, especially if you're a younger engineer, just because you're in that learning mode. And
if I could just ask me real quickly, I find it so much more easy to like I'm currently working on a lot of projects where some of them I need to ask my boss for his thoughts before I send him out. And it's just so easy to walk over and tap him on the shoulder and ask him right there and then. And there's like quick back and forth, and then it's all resolved, versus sending him a message. And even before I send out that message, maybe like proofreading, rereading. That's something I tend to do. I have a habit that I just do like through Teams or through email, and then sending it out. And then maybe or not, he reads it some hours later. And it's just much more better to have in person if possible.
Yeah. And how have you approached building relationships across disciplines throughout your career? I know you've been pretty proactive at that. Yeah.
So with structural engineers, the main discipline that we're interested in interacting with are architects. And just off the bat, like, yes, there's other disciplines, there's MEP, etc. But, structural engineers, they mainly work with, the main other discipline is architecture. So like we're both halves of the circle. And so it's so important I realize the importance of, outside of work, going to industry events where there's going to be architects and hearing from their perspective, hearing what are the trends and the issues going on from their point of view. What are things that they don't yet understand and they want structural engineers to do a better job of explaining to them. I realized early on that is something important to do. And so I would encourage people in the early career to go do that. Go see. You can easily find these events on LinkedIn, whether it's like, you just name drop some organizations in your search, like either USGBC or Carbon Leadership Forum Los Angeles, ULI. There's all these different organizations that it's just like right there, right in your hood, and you can easily just go to them.
Yeah, like learning about some of the other, not just about structural engineering, right? Because yes, we work with structural engineers, but we work with all these other disciplines, like you were saying, real estate developers, architects. And it's a good point, because if you don't talk to them about what's going on in the industry, what it's like to work with different disciplines, you can kind of find what they like and what they don't like, maybe their pain points, like, oh, we really like it when engineers do this, it helps us out so much, or they really hate it when you might do something that in more of an informal setting, right? They can talk about that more. Like they're probably not going to talk about that during a formal email. So getting to know them on a personal level and building that type of relationship, and I think that can help your career because you kind of know what our clients or people in general like to work with. And I know you're good at doing this. So you're good at reaching out to senior engineers, industry leaders. I know that's something I've always had trouble with. I think for seniors, especially, like when I was younger, it was like, oh, they're too high up or whatnot. How do you overcome that? How do you use platforms or your communication style to learn from these experienced professionals?
Yeah. First off, I wanted to say a couple things. One is I'm very fortunate that where I went to school it was very close to the industry that I wanted to be a part of. So I went to UCLA and they did so many times office visits to downtown to people's offices. And that was such a blessing to have that easy connection. I didn't have to go so far to connect with people in person. The second thing is I had a friend named Lisa, and she had a friend named Kevin Martinetti. I love these people. And they have their own day jobs, but they have a heart for people in their early career who like they want to help them out to expand their network and get the job that they want. And so it was like this first job accelerator. One thing that they made us do or encourage us to do was cold contacting people on LinkedIn. And the approach would be, which is the approach that I did, is to, search on LinkedIn, find the people that you want to connect with, read their bios. A lot of senior people, they have a fully fleshed out bio that it's so easy for talking points to message them when you do message them. And in your message, you say like, hey, it's so interesting that you did this, this, and this. I'd love to hear more about your journey. Are you free for a 15-minute call? And, you be specific about that 15 minutes because you know that they have limited time and that you want to make the most out of that. And it's just a call. So it's like an informal thing. And, the point of this call is really just to learn more about them. It's not that you want them to guarantee you a job right after the call. It's more about the intent, and the motive is to get a better understanding of how the industry is working and who is shaping the industry. It tends to be those senior people. It tends to be those industry leaders. So the more that you get to learn about their perspectives, the better it shapes you as you're just gaining wisdom, gaining your own direction. And so cold contacting, something I would say, like I would see someone's profile and I would think, wow, this person is so accomplished. There's no chance they would have time for me. And every time I've always had them say, sure, yeah, I'd love to hop on a call. So people are like actually nice and people are actually generous. And I find like the people who seem the most busy are like the most generous. It's like this. It tends to be true. And so I would encourage people to like get out of their comfort zone and do that, because I don't think a lot of people are doing that. And so it's refreshing when I would think someone like receives a message from a younger engineer saying, hey, I just want to learn more about you. You seem super interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because it shows that initiative, and it's worked on me as a senior engineer, right? It's like students might come and try to get some help or a call. And if I get too many and I'm too busy, I might not have time to do it. But if they're persistent, they'll eventually get through it. I'm like, oh yeah, what's up, man? And then I can give them answer some of their questions about the industry and whatnot. So it does take, depending on how busy, persistence, but they'll see it. And it shows the initiative that you want to learn something from them and you want to learn about the industry. And I think it helps you stand out too, because you just made that connection. Like, oh yeah, it's that person that I talked to or that student that I talked to, and they're really passionate about X, Y, Z. As a professional, I mean, you already made that point of contact, and it's not like through email. If you can get on a call with them, it's on a more familiar basis. So
Yeah.
I think it's great that not many people do, because it's cold calling, right? Well, not cold calling, but cold contact, and you don't know if they're going to respond, but you won't know until you try, maybe even multiple times.
Yeah. I bet you get a bunch of DMs because you're a viral YouTube structural engineer influencer.
Yeah, there's a lot that come in, right? But sometimes we'll just be persistent about it, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy's contacted me for the third time. Let me try to respond to their questions. And I think you're right in terms of what the most busy people tend to be the most generous. Like for me, I try to, probably to a fault of my own, trying to respond to too many, right? And then there goes the time. But I think for people like that, because it does show that, oh, this person is worth my time. They're serious. They're committed. They really want to learn. So they're reaching out to me, because that takes effort in and of itself, just to reach out to somebody, especially if you don't know them and it's more cold contact. But showing that initiative, I think it makes it more worth their time to help someone that really wants help. And how has your ability to, I know you ask good questions. How did you come about knowing how to ask good questions, or what type of questions that you ask? And why do you think that one's really essential for engineers in their career?
Yeah. I mean, if we talk about questions specifically to the cold contacting, the key to a good question is listening. Or in this case, looking at their profile, like reading. They might say, did this project, did this, whatever. But in between the lines, like, what does it show? What does it show their passions are in? And yeah, it's just the importance of whoever ends up taking on this advice that we're sharing right now and actually cold contacting. You don't want it to be like, yes, have your preset questions, but let it be an exchange. Let there be follow up, and demonstrate that you're not saying the question just for the sake of saying it. You're actually wanting to gain something from that conversation. So in terms of smart questions in a workplace setting, I think about how before, in the very beginning, let's talk about the environment where questions are asked, which is, your early career professional, you're the younger engineer on a project, and you're being delegated a task. So the project manager wants to make sure that you know what the task is, and should you need any information, do let them know. And at the same time, throughout the whole project, they're checking your understanding. And saying something that I used to do was like, I would say like, oh, I don't know. But that's not very effective, because it's like, oh, now you leave the project manager. Oh, well, what about it? Do I need to clarify? So it's a matter of saying, the whole point of smart questions is being transparent about what do we know, what do we don't know, and saying, hey, I know this, this, and this, but it may not be clear to me that blah, 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 blah. Here's my understanding, and just be honest about that. I think sometimes we think like, oh, don't even bother asking a question also, because you don't want to look dumb. But honestly, it's always just better to just ask it. And I would say that, if you think a question is dumb, do preface it by saying, hey, you might have explained this before, or I might have missed this, but I just want to ask, blah, 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 blah. So I would say the key to asking smart questions is telling them up front what you know and what you don't know. And that will just make it overall better for the project manager to gain understanding of, oh, maybe I'm like thinking too much, I'm expecting too much of them, or not expecting too much of them. And it just helps them overall, not within that conversation, but helping them overall become just a better project manager or whatever they intend to do.
Yeah. And knowing what you don't know can help in terms of that. I think it's very important to ask those questions, especially if you're younger, right? If it's a lot easier, and you're going to think you're going to be asking dumb questions, but I like the way that you preface it, right? Hey, this may be a dumb question, or maybe I missed it. So it's not like you're kind of gives you a way out, I guess, or softens the blow. If it really is a dumb question, even though I don't think there's really such thing, but it lets them know that it works with other disciplines too. Like, hey, for mechanical, I don't know everything about it. They might be dealing with it every time, but hey, sorry, this may be a dumb question. But how come we can't just move the vent to the left? And then you're going to learn something, and it may be their everyday thing, but they're going to learn something. And it shows that you're humble in that regard, and you're aware that this may be simpler for others, but you're going to learn a lot through that. That's how we all get smarter. And I think that it's really important for the younger engineers to do that, even from a manager perspective. When I get engineers that don't ask a lot of questions, it kind of raises concerns in terms of, wait, I know they don't know everything. There's a lot to learn in this industry. Why aren't they asking? And so I'd rather have someone that asks a lot of questions than someone that doesn't have any, because it brings that communication style too. You kind of see what the engineers are capable of, or what they need to fill in some of the gaps, those knowledge gaps in. So I think having your type of mindset where you do the work, you do the background info of, okay, I don't know this, I don't know this, I need to know this, I don't know how to get to know that, then you can kind of reframe your questions into showing them the research that you did. Here, I did this, I don't know where to go from here because this is the extent of my knowledge. So that fills in a lot of the communication. And I wanted to talk about some of the career strategies that you've been through. Like, how do you hold yourself accountable? What was your career strategy in, especially for younger engineers that are entering the industry? What advice can you give to that?
Yeah, so I wanted to be more engaged in my industry. And what I would say is something that I learned recently on LinkedIn was this. Apparently Jeff Bezos did this interview and he talked about, they talk about work-life balance a lot, but he proposed this idea of work-life harmony, which is basically, if I'm happy at home, then I'll be happy at work. I can add value to my work. And so in your early 20s, you want to make sure that you're trying to max out all areas of your life, because your life is not just your work. It's your health, it's your friends, it's everything. And you want to make sure you take that care of that, because that ends up bleeding into how you are at work, how you perform at work. And so I would say that one thing is something, it's like a mindset shift that I've adopted in my everyday life. Now, for me personally, in my last year of school, I was like, my morning routine sucks, and that routine sucks. I need to get my life together. And so I joined this high performance training program where basically we would buddy up with an accountability partner, and we would make sure that we're reaching each other's goals, sticking to our whys. And so when I got through all those cold contacting, that's something that is like friction within me. I didn't want to do it, and I needed someone to push me to do it. And so that accountability really helped me. So I would really advise that, sure, you have your friends, but try to find one person who you guys both are on the same page of the direction you want to go to, and you just keep each other in check. And you'll find that doing those, it's something that you do early on, it will just reap massive benefits going down the line. Yeah, I would advise that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Where you don't want to do something, but it's like when you you get a buddy, and let's just say the gym, right? As a all right, you're going? I guess I got to go. Because for me, if I go do something by myself, probably won't give it that effort. But if you have someone else that's counting on you, or maybe holding you accountable in some point like that, it's you don't want to let them down. And it adds you make it really hard to just not do the thing that you're trying to do. So I think that's a great strategy. I think even with in career wise too, like having some type of mentor or a work buddy where you guys have a team or something like that, where you can say something, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then knowing that someone else is counting on you to do that, maybe out of your comfort zone, but it's going to be good for your career. Doing things like that, like public speaking or giving a talk, like, oh, you should do the next talk. I know you're going to not like it, but it's going to be good in the long term. So things like that, I think that's a good strategy. And yeah, I like the point about your work-life balance too, right? In terms of, I think you have to figure out how to survive first, so early on, right after you graduate, you get in your career, making sure that most of the aspects of your life are in check. And because, yeah, it'll bleed into different parts of your work. If one part isn't working out, then you could probably see it at work. If you had a bad day at home or something, you can kind of see it sometimes too at work when people are having off days. So I think that's really important. And how have you approached balancing the details of structural design with a broader understanding of the industry? I know we can get into the details for structural engineering, but I think what you found out is there's going to be benefits of not just getting into the micro level stuff, but it seems like you're kind of industry wide too. You see what the bigger picture is. How have you approached that?
Yeah. I would say it's very easy when you're early in your career and perhaps you're assigned to a project where, that's your project for months and all you think about is just that project. But, the overall idea is like, be curious and think about, okay, what is the significance of this project to the city, to the community, and this type of project, this type of building? Why is it being needed? Is there a trend for that type of building to be needed? And it's just asking the global trends of the global questions of what is going on and what's going on in the industry. Because yes, that our role is, structural engineering, structural design, but it's when you have that lens, you have a focused lens on the micro, focused lens on the macro, and you can like switch on and off depending on which mode you need to go to. It just helps that overall in the background, you're always thinking the bigger picture, and that will just help you become a more informed engineer. And also in the background, when you design, you'll also be thinking about the other disciplines. Like you could be designing something for like a week and then you realize, oh, there has to be MEP. Didn't think about that. Just an example. And so it's all about, you do what you know, but also if you can help the whole team out by, thinking about these things in the background, it just overall makes like a better collaborative team.
Yeah, I think that's one of the lessons I've learned as I've gained more experience as an engineer. It's not just about the structure, right? It's a team game. There's architecture, MEP. And if you don't think about the bigger picture, it's going to come back and there's going to be headaches to deal with. So thinking about how everyone interacts and seeing the bigger picture, I think that's what makes a good engineer in the end. It's not just the structural, but knowing all the things that go into a structure makes you a better engineer. And even as a manager or even a business leader or something like that, seeing the bigger picture, I think that helps tremendously. And knowing both is really good. I think engineers in general are really good at focusing in on a detail, doing the calcs for that. But when you open it up, you can be a better team member because you can see the bigger picture. And if you're training new engineers, that helps them out too, because you don't just want them. Yeah, I think with engineers, it's generally they're too micro-focused, but when you can help them see the bigger picture, how it all fits into, it's not just engineering, it gets into architecture, the community that building is for, what's that building going to do at the end, and why it's important to not have that column in the middle. It's, there's a purpose for it, seeing what that bigger picture is. I think can definitely
always
help.
That annoying column in the middle.
Yep. And it's, I just remember there's like some annoying spots. Like sometimes I'll go to, a studio, a dance studio or a yoga studio, and there's just an annoying column in the middle of the studio. And I'm like, I wish they would get rid of this. There's a reason. Yeah. It's not just about the structure. Sometimes there's some, what's that going to be used for?
Right.
I remember you mentioned finding your why, and how do you go about finding your why in structural engineering? And even, I know you're a big part of you're one of the leaders of the Carbon Leadership Forum. So how do you find your why? What drives you to do those? And what do you think about those experiences that you gain from those?
Yeah, I mean, the global idea is that I want to make an impact. I've been mentored and blessed with good mentors and good teachers, and I want to give back and do something with the knowledge that I've gained. And so, for me, my story, it came from, like, my dad is a civil engineer and he would take me along to his job sites. So my brain was always primed on like the bones of a building. And then later on, learning about climate change, learning about, environment, and then realizing, structural engineers, building design and environment, those are not two separate things. There's a thing about embodied carbon of a building. And I was very fortunate that, as I mentioned, coming from UCLA and being easily to connect with people in downtown and having people that, you learn from them and help them just broaden your perspective. So I would say that advice for someone who is crafting their why, start from what interests you. And it may be like you're so young. I just want to be open to anything that interests me. And that's totally fine too. And as you're being interested, do learn from the people within your office, but do take the effort to meet people outside your office, like industry, and going to events, having one-on-ones with people who have been there, who can share like pain points in the industry that perhaps that pain point is like, actually, I want to focus in on that problem and I want to help solve that problem. So yeah, that would be, you start somewhere, you go down one path, turns out maybe you didn't like that path, all good, go down a different path. But it's all about getting more clarity on what you want to do and stick to that why that you formulated for yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of like finding what major you want to be in. One reminds me of college, trying to figure out what major I wanted to do. And it's like, you don't know, you haven't worked in it. So it's about trying those different things or asking those different questions about what you find interested in. I think doing that type of research of maybe I want to do structures, maybe I want to do geotech. I almost became a geotech. I know in school, that's what I was interested in. And then I got to see some of the differences of talking to actual geotechs and structural engineers. That helped me make my decision to go into structures. So I might have been a geotech in another timeline.
In the multiverse.
Yeah, but talking to those different professionals, right? Seeing what it's actually like. And I think that's a part of your strategy of building that network, knowing someone in the industry that you can talk to get a bit better picture of what you're actually going to be doing. Yeah, it's a big help to figure out what you like and explore it. Right? I'm sure you went with the Carbon Leadership Forum, you had an interest in that, then you just started getting more into it. I like this type of deal. And then now you're one of the leaders of it. So yeah, definitely dipping your toes in. I think that's a great way to think about it. You'll find out what you like, what you don't like, but you have to show up.
Exactly.
And Tsandi, do you have any final advice for young engineers or even career professionals, maybe students in general, that you want to share with them?
Only one piece of advice. Can I say 3?
You can say 3. You can say 3.
I would say the first thing is visualize. I think about how there's so much social media, there's so much, you go on your phone, there's so many things coming at you that you may forget your core values. And so, take a second, close your eyes, visualize where you want to be, who you want to be around, what's the impact that you want to make. And, take a moment every day to visualize that. And you'll find that when you do like that, like in the morning, what you do throughout the day ends up being from that vision. And so you won't be blind walking. You'll always be approaching everything with an intent, and everything is intentional. And that's very important when you're exploring searching, when you're young. The second thing I would say, I've gotten really into personality tests and like Myers-Briggs and the Gallup Strength Finders. I don't know if that's talked about a lot. It is talked about a lot among my friend group, but I don't know if other people do it, but I find it so valuable because you end up learning what are your top 5 strengths, what can you contribute to a team in the best ways that you can personally or uniquely you. And it also helps you learn, how do I communicate and how might that clash or not clash with different types of people. And the more you're better aware of how you operate and how you function in a team, the better that, you just have that awareness, and the better that the faster the team can grow in a way that, you want to grow. You want the company to be better, and it's just all beneficial all around. The last thing is that, there's a book called The Defining Decades, and in that the defining decade is your 20s. And I so believe that, especially the early 20s, you get out of college, you have a fresh mind, you're open to all these different things, you're resetting your routines, and take this opportunity to grind. Like, no one's expecting you to be so polished out of college. People know that, people who are more senior in this industry, they know that, like, yeah, you're absorbing, this is the time to be a sponge and learn, and don't block yourself off from those learning opportunities. And don't have that ego of saying, I'll learn it when it's time to learn it. Like, be curious, focus on, I also learned this thing of, instead of be interesting, be interested. And, that comes with cold call acting. You do that because, you're really interested in them. So take your 20s, grind, work hard, meet people, and you'll find that, you go to an event, you end up recognizing all the people there because you've taken your due diligence to get to know them beforehand and along the way throughout the years. And it ends up just being you end up contributing to making the industry more tight-knit and stronger.
Yeah, that's great. I think to summarize the way I thought of it, finding your North Star every day. I think you mentioned you don't want to be that person that just goes into work, does their thing, clocks out, finding out what you want to do every day in the morning, and finding out what your goals are for that day and why you're doing it. I think that's great. And the second part about the personality tests, that one's pretty cool. I'm familiar with those too. They're pretty fun, but I think what you were saying too was, or maybe implying, was the communication styles. If you know how you work, even though it's not all, it's not completely true for all those, but you can find yourself having some aspects of those personalities. The way you communicate may not be the best way. Someone else with maybe a different personality type is the best way to communicate. So knowing that there's differences in the way people can communicate, I know that's definitely helped out in terms of dealing with people with different personalities or communication styles. Like, you'll get, this person, they don't really care how I feel. They just want to know what the numbers are. And cool, let's communicate to them in this way with some numbers. And that way you both can achieve the goal that you're trying to do. And that third piece of advice, early 20s, I think that's in terms of, I feel that way with some of the engineering tests, where that's the time to take your test. You just graduated, you're fresh, get your exams out of the way. Because, the older you get, the more, I think, less time you're going to get. That's what I learned out from the ASCE exams that we have to take later on. It was like, this is a bad timing for a test. I wish they would have just done this early on in the career, right? Where you are a sponge, you're in that sponge mode, you're in learning mode. And that's the time to take advantage of it. That's, I think, similar to pouring your foundation, like of your career foundation, not just technically, but from what you've been doing too, building up that network to be known in the industry and making a group of friends that you can work with to impact the industry. So great advice. Thanks so much, Tsandi. I appreciate it for you coming on, sharing your story, giving us some tips and tricks that have definitely been successful for you. So I hope all the other engineers that are listening can take some of that advice and improve their careers too. So I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and or questions. To leave them, please visit structuralengineeringchannel.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources or websites mentioned during this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, we wish you the best in all of your structural engineering endeavors.